Looking back on the journey that led me here, I can't help but reflect on the beginning of our relationship. We first crossed paths in college, both brimming with ambition, and instantly felt a strong connection. Jenny was everything I could have ever hoped for: gorgeous, intelligent, and full of zest. We were inseparable, and I truly believed I had found my perfect match. Our relationship grew quickly, and I was certain we were on the path to lifelong happiness. But as the years rolled on, reality began to set in. The carefree days of our youth faded into the background, replaced by the heavy responsibilities of adulthood. The woman I once idolized slowly transformed into someone I barely recognized. Our lives became dominated by raising kids, managing careers, and juggling complicated family dynamics. The passionate love that once blazed brightly began to dim, and I found myself trapped in a marriage that was far from the fairy tale I had envisioned. We reached a breaking point where intimacy dwindled to almost nothing, maybe happening once a month if Jenny wasn't holding on to some grudge. In the early days, our physical connection was frequent, 4 or 5 times a week, and it was her enthusiasm and energy in those moments that drew me to her. But now, Jenny had changed, no longer the vibrant, captivating woman I married. She became distant, uninterested in closeness, almost as if she resented it. Jenny has 2 younger sisters, Liz and Emily, both known for their lively and fun-loving personalities, especially in their relationships. I was thrilled when Jenny chose me. We got married 12 years ago after she became pregnant in college. We were both seniors and deeply in love, planning to marry anyway. Our daughter Sarah was born 5 months after the wedding, followed by our son Josh a year and a half later. Both kids are spoiled by their mother, her sisters, and her parents, who have always looked down on me for not providing the luxuries they wanted for Jenny. Her parents, who never worked a day in their lives, have lived off inheritances that are now dwindling. But I'm the only one who knows that because I checked their property records years ago. Liz is married to Dave, who runs 5 laundromats for his dad, and Emily is married to Steve, who inherited a house and some money when his grandparents passed. He claims to own a marketing firm, though I've never seen him actually work. Like Jenny, they're all fun at parties, but are pretty useless when it comes to real responsibilities. 2 years ago, I sat in my home office, frustrated after having to take care of myself in the shower that morning, and took a hard look at my life. Almost no intimacy, a lazy wife who doesn't work, 2 kids who don't respect me and are turning out just like their mother, a job I despise where the company treats us like we're expendable, and a house too close to her parents where it snows for 4 months out of the year. I grew up in the South and can't stand the cold. I drive a 10-year-old car that was originally Jenny's until she wrecked it, traded in my car, and bought herself a new one because she couldn't wait for hers to be repaired. I'm not even allowed to drive the new car without getting an earful of insults, and intimacy? Non-existent. We're paying for a house that's too big because we need to live near her family, paying for a small inbred dog that requires meds just to survive, paying for a maid twice a week because housework exhausts her to the point of being too tired for intimacy. 10 years ago, the slight increase in physical connection lasted 2 months, but the maid is still around. We're also paying for a clubhouse and spa membership so she can hang out with her friends and sisters. I don't play golf and have never set foot in the spa. We're shelling out money for new clothes and hairstyling because she needs to look good for her social events. We're paying for tennis lessons for her and the kids, even though none of them are any good and never actually play. If they could, the kids would stay glued to screens all day. We take 3 vacations each year, one in the winter with her family for skiing, which I don't do because of a bad knee, one in the spring to a big city for shopping, and one in the summer to the beach, a trip I'm not even invited to. Christmas and Thanksgiving are always spent at her family's houses. My parents live in a small bungalow on a beach in the south, but their house is apparently too small to visit. 1 wife, 2 kids, 1 father-in-law, 1 mother-in-law, 2 sisters-in-law, 2 nephews, 2 nieces, and 2 brothers-in-law, all of whom ridicule me because I don't have a family inheritance making life easy. I work long hours, yet my wife and kids don't appreciate the effort I put in to make their lives comfortable. And on top of all that, my wife is cheating on me. Yep, she was a cheating liar. I didn't just stumble upon this, I started to get suspicious a few months before I took a hard look at my life. I wanted to understand why Jenny seemed so uninterested in intimacy. Either she'd lost interest or she was getting it somewhere else. So I decided to investigate. We live in a digital age where getting spyware, recorders, cameras, and monitoring software is a breeze. I started by placing a recorder in her car connected to the car battery for unlimited power and set up a Bluetooth station in the garage to automatically download recordings to my home PC. I then installed discrete cameras in every room of the house except the kids' rooms and even covered outdoor areas like the patio, pool, and garage, all feeding directly to my computer. From the early footage, I figured out Jenny's phone code, which she had kept secret from me. Around 3 a.m., I accessed her phone and installed monitoring software that allowed me to listen to all her calls and read every message. I also upgraded our home internet to business class, enabling remote access to my home PC from my phone. 2 weeks later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my office and listened to a recording from her car. I heard Jenny say, "Can you meet this Thursday at my place? 10 works for me. I can't wait to ride you hard." "Me too, babe. Love you." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I immediately shut down my computer and took the dog for a walk, seething with anger. I braced myself for the worst, but when the truth finally hit, it was still like a punch in the gut. However, instead of sadness, I found only anger boiling inside me. The next morning, the reality of my situation hit me hard, a cheating wife and a life full of one-sided sacrifices. I knew I had to escape this nightmare. My first priority was identifying the guy and gathering solid evidence. Oddly enough, there were no incriminating messages on Jenny's phone. She must have been using another one. After working late, I combed through her car and found the hidden phone tucked inside the air vent of the center console, secured with Velcro. I used the same code she used for her primary phone, installed monitoring software, and put everything back as I found it. Then I reviewed the results. 2 years' worth of deleted but recoverable texts. What I discovered was beyond shocking. The messages revealed that Jenny and her sisters were comparing their lovers' performances and even discussed swapping partners. Jenny's latest fling was with our son's Little League coach. Liz had her eye on a young barista, but Jenny and Emily warned her that unmarried men were off limits. Even their mother had rules for cheating. Emily was involved with a handyman who had apparently been with all 3 sisters, and their mom had hooked up with him first. Jenny had also slept with Dave and Steve, though only on occasion, and her sisters encouraged her to keep them in check. I knew I had to devise an escape plan. Over the following week, I played the role of the clueless husband, starting petty arguments over household chores, which led Jenny to snap at me. I made a mental note to restart these fights periodically and eventually moved into the guest room. A week later, I had my plan in place. I wanted out of the marriage, out of my dead-end job, full financial control, no alimony, and no custody of the kids since she had ruined them. I wanted to hurt my in-laws and make Jenny suffer mentally for as long as possible. Ultimately, I wanted to start fresh and build a real family. I realized I had been naive. Neither Jenny nor her family valued a hard-working, loyal husband. Her parents, sisters, and their spouses were toxic, selfish people who only cared about fulfilling their own desires. I began plotting how to break up her sisters' marriages and use my in-laws' weaknesses to my advantage. It was time to seize control. During a barbecue at Liz's house, I discreetly took close-up photos of various objects: a clock on the mantel, a kitchen timer, and a smoke detector. At Emily's, I did the same with a couple of alarm clocks and a picture frame with a hidden camera I had gifted them last Christmas. At Jenny's mom's house, I snapped a picture of an old grandfather clock in the hallway. I had already replaced all the smoke detectors in our house a year ago, partly to stop Jenny from complaining. The hardest part was finding a matching doorbell camera, but a quick search online solved that problem. After installing cameras in each house, I threw a backyard pool party and invited everyone over. While they were swimming, I borrowed their house keys and installed monitoring software on their phones. knowing their passcodes from earlier spying. During the party, I accidentally dropped a bag of ice. Liz snapped, "Can't you do anything right? Go get more ice." I muttered an apology and left. On my way, I stopped by Jenny's mom's, Emily's, and Liz's houses to make some replacements. I installed wireless routers in their attics after connecting to their networks. I also copied their house keys, grabbed some ice, and headed back. When I returned, Emily smirked. "Took you long enough." I made up a story about a flat tire. No one thanked me or even pretended to care. 2 days later, I had video evidence of Emily with that handyman. They barely made it inside before tearing off their clothes, leaving a trail from the front door to the bedroom. No foreplay, just straight to the action. Afterward, he said he had to leave before his wife got suspicious. Emily tried to convince him to stay for another round, but he declined, saying he needed to save his energy for his wife. As he left, he entered his phone code right in front of the camera, which I quickly noted. The next Thursday, I slipped into their house while they were distracted and installed monitoring software on his phone, which was lying on the living room floor. Things spiraled from there. The next day, I discovered Liz's lover was actually her own uncle, and to my shock, her aunt was in on it too. All three of them undressed, and the aunt, who was surprisingly fit for her age, joined in. I had to force myself to watch, thinking I'd rather be anywhere else. Later, I caught my wife in our bedroom with our neighbor's wife, Brenda, a striking redhead. They kissed passionately, and I found myself weirdly drawn to that footage. Afterward, Brenda took a quick shower and left, limping slightly as she walked home. Then came the real shocker. Dave and Steve, my brothers-in-law, entered Liz's bedroom and started undressing. I realized I'd never be able to shake hands with them again after what I saw. Finally, I reviewed footage from Jenny's parents' house. I skipped most of it, not wanting to see them naked, but I did catch Jenny's uncle with her mom while her dad watched from a chair by the bed. Afterward, her mom pulled out a device that looked like something from a construction site and went to work. The noise could probably be heard throughout the neighborhood. It was all easier than I had expected, but much stranger than I could have imagined. I even found myself wondering if I could get Morgan Freeman to narrate these videos. And in case you're wondering, was this video obtained legally? Who cares? I never planned to take this to court. My goal was to ensure no one would want these videos to ever see the light of day before I shared any of them. I knew I had to remove the recorders before anyone could trace them back to me. Taking out the cameras from their homes was simple enough. I hosted another barbecue, and as if on cue, I accidentally dropped a bag of ice. Jenny laughed. "Nice going, genius." Liz added, "Does he even know how to do anything right?" Emily chimed in, "Maybe his brain's in his wallet." They all chuckled, and even my daughter Sarah mumbled, "Mom, why is he always so embarrassing?" Steve suggested, "Next time just ask for help with the heavy stuff." Dave joked, "We can have one of the girls help you out next time, man." My son Josh sneered, "Man up, Dad." They all laughed, and Jenny rolled her eyes, telling me to go get more ice. Liz's parents, never ones to miss a chance to chime in, urged me to hurry because their drinks were getting warm. Typical. But this was the first time all of them mocked me at once. I took the opportunity to leave, retrieve the alarm clocks, and replace them with new cameras, all in the time it took to get a fresh bag of ice. First, I sent the video of Emily with the handyman to her and Steve, then sent the video of Liz with her uncle and aunt to her and Dave with a message. "You shouldn't mess with another woman's husband." Did everything explode immediately? Not exactly. The sisters ran to their mother, who intervened with the usual "for the sake of the kids" line. "It was just a mistake. She only loves you," she pleaded. But the real blow came when their mom privately told each son-in-law, "You're our favorite, and we plan to leave all our inheritance to you and our daughter." Each thought he was the chosen one. To push them further, I sent Dave and Steve their own compromising videos with a message. "This will go public if you don't file for divorce on grounds of infidelity within a year. No self-respecting man should stay married after what she did." When Dave and Steve were complaining about their wives without mentioning the cheating, I casually dropped a bombshell. I think the in-laws are broke. I heard they've got a second mortgage, no properties left, no savings, and no social security. They never worked, so it adds up. That was the final straw. Dave and Steve filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity within a week, using the same attorney. Jenny's parents were devastated when they discovered how little Dave and Steve actually had. It turned out Dave wasn't a big shot after all. He was just a manager at his dad's failing laundromat chain, living in a house his dad still owned as a wedding gift. Both cars? Company cars. Steve wasn't much better off. His so-called marketing firm was a front, and his small inheritance and trust fund, which he thought were safe in the divorce, got split, leaving him with a third while Emily got the rest. It wasn't much, but it was enough to leave him hurting. As for their house, everyone thought Steve owned it, but it was actually his parents'. He had spun a tale about buying it from them when they retired, but they still owned it. Steve's parents essentially disowned him, letting him live there on the condition he stayed out of their lives for good. Emily tried to convince them to let her and the kids stay, but my mother-in-law ruined it by threatening to sue Steve's dad if he didn't let them live there for free. He told her, "You can buy the house and gift it to your daughter," and hung up. The house went up for sale 2 days later. Meanwhile, Steve's marketing firm was a sham. He'd been fired from his first job out of college for sexual harassment, and his so-called business was nothing more than a cover. A week later, Jenny's mom ended up in jail with a restraining order after attacking the handyman's wife. She believed the handyman's wife was behind the incriminating videos and slapped her in a local cafe. Bad move. The handyman's wife, with her twins in a stroller, punched my mother-in-law, breaking her nose and giving her 2 black eyes. The whole incident was caught on the cafe's security cameras and a hidden camera in my mother-in-law's car. While waiting for the police, the handyman's wife asked, "Why do you think I sent the videos?" My mother-in-law, still sneering despite her broken nose, replied, "He said you weren't any good in bed. Did you really think you could keep him all to yourself when we were more than willing to share?" I decided to help the handyman's wife by sending her the video of Emily with the handyman, along with his trophy pics and cheating texts. The handyman was divorced within 3 months. At a family gathering, Dave and Steve, both drunk, complained to me about their divorces. Steve admitted he married Emily hoping her parents were rich and that it would reconcile him with his own dad. Now he had almost nothing left, with most of his trust fund going to his ex-wife. Dave revealed that he married Liz, hoping to inherit his dad's laundromat chain, but instead he was stuck managing a store that was losing money. Worse, his dad's new wife was pregnant, making Dave doubt he'd inherit anything at all. It turned out the sisters were too focused on marrying into wealth to realize their husbands weren't as rich as they seemed. The gold diggers had been fooled by even bigger liars. Both daughters ended up moving back in with their parents, who despised having them and their kids around. Jenny's mom even complained, "Do we really have to put up with those 2 witches and their bratty kids?" With the sisters divorced, my little hobby was paying off. Life at home improved slightly, and Jenny even briefly complimented me as the main breadwinner compared to her sister's exes, though they quickly turned it into a joke. While my mother-in-law was recovering from nose surgery, I enjoyed a brief reprieve from her interference. Her nose healed crooked and noticeably bigger, which felt like a small victory for me. Meanwhile, I continued planning my next moves. As time passed, my frustration with my boss, Jacob, grew. He had become a greedy, self-absorbed jerk as the company expanded. What used to be generous bonuses of $116,000 had dwindled to barely $20,000, and thanks to inflation and rising costs, I was actually earning less every year. Given how well my surveillance had worked at home, I decided to expand it to Jacob's office, his house, and his secretary Olivia's apartment. There were plenty of whispers about them having an affair, and it didn't take long to confirm. During a lunch break, I managed to swipe a copy of Olivia's apartment key and later installed cameras and monitoring software. With access to their phones, I discovered they were meeting every Friday at Olivia's place. I captured everything on video. Unlike others at work, I had always been on decent terms with Olivia. I wasn't afraid of Jacob, nor was I romantically interested in Olivia, though most of the women in the office didn't like her. Olivia dressed conservatively, often in long skirts and blouses that made her look older. I assumed she was trying to hide some extra weight, but after seeing the footage, I realized that wasn't true. Olivia was in great shape, working out regularly and clearly taking care of herself. She just chose to downplay it at work, which I found admirable. As for Jacob, he was a 2-minute man, so I didn't have to endure watching much of their encounters. After a month of surveillance, I decided to quit my job. I had developed the company's software from the ground up, so I knew they would need my help to complete their latest project. Conveniently, a critical part of the code had recently become corrupted, and the backups were mysteriously missing, thanks to a mistake by IT. I started working from home, so my daily routine didn't change much. 2 weeks later, Jacob was begging me to come back. I negotiated a contract that doubled my previous hourly rate, which meant I could earn 4 times my old salary with overtime. I rewrote the corrupted code from memory, making improvements and adding new features that the sales team had been requesting. The other modules needed adjustments to integrate with the new one, but the enhancements made my sales module even more valuable. Customers were thrilled with the updates, and both Jacob's software and my new company's software gained success. After 30 days, my contract was extended indefinitely. A week later, Jenny received a letter from a lawyer about a distant relative who had passed away. We met with the attorneys and found out that her great-aunt, who had no close family, had left behind a trust fund. It provided $4,000 per month to a family member who demonstrated good moral character. If that person had a child and named it after her late husband, the amount would increase to $20,000 per month. Jenny's 2 sisters were excluded due to their behavior, so the attorneys approached her. We signed the paperwork and received our first check. Jenny was ecstatic and couldn't stop talking about going off birth control and having another baby to secure the larger payout. Once we were home, I told her we needed to talk. She was too excited to notice the seriousness in my voice. At the kitchen table, I had to ask her to stop texting. I confessed, I quit my job a year ago and things haven't gone as planned. What? And you're just now telling me? She exploded. I started my own software company. It's doing well, but it's taking longer than expected. Well, that doesn't matter now, she replied, brushing it off. We have plenty of money and more on the way. She leaned in to kiss me, but I stopped her. I'm never going to sleep with you again, I said calmly. She turned red with fury. What did you just say? I'm never going to be with you again. She screamed, Who do you think you are? I calmly pulled out my phone and showed her a video. Remember when your sisters got those tapes from the handyman's wife? We got one too, but I deleted your copy so you wouldn't know. I kept mine just in case. I hit play and she stood there paralyzed with shock, eyes wide, mouth open, her hands trembling at her sides. I told her I met with the handyman's wife and begged her to let us reconcile. I even explained that I allowed you to be with other women because I couldn't fulfill that need. For a moment there was a flicker of something like sympathy in Jenny's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a calculating glare. That's all in the past. What do you mean you won't sleep with me? She demanded. I shouted, We haven't been together in over a year. Why would I start now? Jenny looked confused and said, Because of the money. $20,000 a month is a lot. Don't be mad at me. I've been stressed, but that's over now. Let's focus on our future and having another baby. No, I replied. You've treated me like garbage ever since we got married. Her tone changed instantly. Listen, you pathetic loser, we're going to have a baby or I'll divorce you. Got it? She hissed, jabbing her finger at me. I just stared at her. And I'm not sharing the $4,000 a month either, she added, trying to sound tough. I leaned back and calmly said, Fine by me. I'm filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Can you give me the number of the attorney we just met? They seemed competent. I'm sure I can find a top-notch divorce attorney with that kind of money, I said, my voice cold and steady. Jenny's demeanor changed instantly. She realized the power had shifted. She sat down, her voice softening as she said, "It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. I love you, and only you. We've built so much together. Please don't throw it all away." "Looks like I need to learn the new rules," I replied nonchalantly. "The lies, the cheating. I swear it was all a mistake. I want things back to the way they used to be," she pleaded. "I agree. Let's head to the bedroom right now," she suggested with sudden enthusiasm. "I knew you still cared," I said, letting a bit of hope slip through. "No, I was just messing with you," she retorted sharply. "See how easy it is to fall for a lie? It's not so fun when the tables are turned, is it? If you truly loved me, you'd fight to save this marriage," she added, her tone cutting. "You're right, I'll do better. I'll work harder at this," I conceded, hoping to keep the situation from escalating. "I knew you loved me. How about showing me in the bedroom?" she purred, softening her voice. "No, I'm never sleeping with you again," I stated, resolute. Jenny's eyes widened in shock. "But you just said you'd work on our relationship," she exclaimed, clearly confused. "I did say that. I was lying," I admitted, feeling a strange sense of detachment. "It gets easier every time." Jenny's eyes welled up with tears. "I'm sorry, I was joking. Do you really mean it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No, I don't. I lied again," I responded, my tone icy. "Wow, lying really does make it easier to handle someone who trusts you, doesn't it?" she said bitterly. "I've been lying too. My parents are filthy rich and will never have to worry about money again. I'll never leave you, and you'll have an endless supply of cash for life," she added, her pout deepening. "Not so funny, is it? It's tough talking to someone who lies just to manipulate you," I replied. "I'm sorry. I won't lie to you again," I promised, trying to end this twisted game. "Will you really stop lying to me?" she asked, doubt heavy in her voice. "Yes, I will," I assured her. A tear slid down Jenny's cheek. "I love you with all my heart. Sarah and Josh love you too. My family thinks you're an amazing husband," she said, her tone softening again. "I'm not sure I believe you. They were pretty disrespectful just the other day," I replied, still skeptical. "No, you know that's not true. They were just teasing. Let's have a gathering this weekend so you can see how much everyone appreciates you," she suggested, trying to convince me. "That sounds like fun." "Will Mark and Ron be there too?" I asked, pretending to be interested. "Of course, the whole family," she confirmed. "Is Saturday afternoon okay?" I asked, setting up a tentative plan. "Sure, that would be great," she agreed. Then, with a touch of suspicion, she added, "You're not messing with me again, are you?" "No, having everyone over will be a memorable event," I replied, trying to reassure her. "Great. A big party to show how much everyone cares about you," she said, hugging me while I remained seated, even planting a kiss on top of my head. Lucky me. I'd been sleeping in the guest room for over a year, and I installed a deadbolt after moving in, always keeping the door locked. Around 5 a.m., I heard an alarm go off somewhere in the house, and someone tried to pick the lock on my door, but the deadbolt held strong. I guess someone thought they could sneak into my bed early in the morning. Jenny started calling all the relatives to invite them. Listening in on her calls was amusing. She had to bribe her sisters, Liz and Emily, with part of the $4,000 to get them to show up. Ron and Mark were easy to convince. She promised them favors if they attended. Her parents weren't interested until they heard about the $20,000 a month. Her dad was already plotting with Jenny on how to cut me out of the money after the baby was born. The most painful part was watching Jenny persuade Sarah and Josh, our own kids, to be nice to me. She mentioned the money, and they reluctantly agreed. Displeased with their attitudes, she threatened to cut off their allowance, take away their phones, home computers, and any future car if they messed up. They quickly promised to be on their best behavior for their dad. But don't worry, it didn't sting too much. 7 years ago, I started seeing them as angry stepchildren, which is how they treated me and the level of authority I had over them. You'd think I'd won the lottery. Everyone was overly nice, though the fake smiles and clenched teeth were hard to miss. I played along, being polite. I complimented Sarah and Josh on their behavior, which was so good it felt like they weren't even my kids. I casually mentioned to Emily that I had seen her boss leaving a downtown hotel, which made her nervous since she had just been with him. He's married with 4 kids, but she's been trying to latch onto a wealthier man. I found Ron and Mark by the bar and asked about their social life now that they were single. When they mentioned a certain club, I scowled and told them I'd heard it's where divorced guys go to get drunk and taken advantage of. They turned pale. I had bugged their new apartment after all. I casually mentioned to my father-in-law that I thought I saw him and his brother with a young woman named Anley at a restaurant. My mother-in-law's glare could melt steel. I knew Anley was a transgender woman they had met at a hotel. Later, my father-in-law suddenly needed a refill on his drink, even though it was already full. I guess he never shared those details with his wife. Finally, I found myself alone with my mother-in-law by the pool. No one dared to interrupt us. I remarked on how nice it was to see everyone together again. She mentioned Ron and Mark staying friends and becoming roommates after the divorce, but her eyes hinted that she suspected they were more than just friends. I added that Liz and Emily would bounce back, though raising 2 kids and working as a waitress and secretary would leave little time for romance, especially with 10 more years until the grandkids were out of her house. I then casually mentioned how well Sarah and Josh were doing in school and suggested a pool party to inspire them. She absent-mindedly agreed, even though I knew the pool had been drained years ago to save money. I brought up seeing her husband and his brother laughing and dining with her niece at a hotel restaurant. I showed her a photo I had carefully edited, removing the feet from high heels under the table and raising a napkin on her husband's lap. After staring at it for nearly a minute, she quietly asked me to send it to her, seething with anger. As I glanced around, I noticed everyone was watching us. My mother-in-law, usually loud and domineering, was silent, a first in her life. "So I guess Jenny mentioned her little windfall," I said casually. "Yes, it's a great opportunity for you two to get ahead. You should think about having another baby to secure your financial future, especially given your job situation," my mother-in-law responded, a calculating look in her eyes. "Well, Jenny and I have had some marital challenges. We'll see if we can work through them." "She loves you, and it's a lot of money," she said, practically drooling at the thought. "I hope you'll encourage her to do whatever it takes to make our marriage work," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. My mother-in-law gave me a smug look and said, "Don't wait too long. She has other options." I leaned back in my chair, chuckling. "Other options? Let's see, her sisters? Infidelity's not an option for them anymore. And if Jenny tries to divorce me, I'll countersue for infidelity. I've got all the proof I need. If she gets pregnant by someone else, a DNA test will expose it. And I've already lined up a top attorney with all the evidence. In case something happens to me, any lawsuit will cut off any money going to her. So, what were these other options?" My mother-in-law's smugness faded, replaced by shock as she stared at me, speechless. Everyone at the party turned to look at us, confusion evident on their faces. I smiled, watching her struggle to find words. Finally, she managed to stammer, "Can you get me another soda, please?" I took her glass and headed to the kitchen. As I filled it, I watched from the sink as she frantically whispered to her husband and daughters. They all turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of anger and confusion. Realizing I was watching, she abruptly grabbed her husband's hand and led him out of the backyard through the side gate without a word. Liz and Emily then stormed into the house, berating me for upsetting their mother, demanding to know what I had said. After that day, my mother-in-law never spoke directly to me again. Next, I turned my attention to Sasha. She was 58, a recently divorced woman whose husband had cheated on her. I had dug through court documents and PI reports on her case. Originally, I hadn't planned to involve Sasha, but after overhearing her express her disgust with Jacob and frustration with her life, I saw potential. Anyone who worked so hard to downplay such a great figure was someone I wanted on my team. I discreetly photographed Jacob and Sasha leaving a downtown hotel together. No intimate moments, just enough to suggest something was going on. I sent the photos to Jacob's wife. When Jacob got home, his wife confronted him with the pictures, reminding him of their ground rules. No affairs at home, no children involved, and nothing public. Jacob tried to argue, but eventually caved in. I knew cracking her would take more effort, so I decided to up the stakes. That Monday, Jacob fired Sasha. I was waiting outside as she left. "Hey, Sasha, what's wrong?" I asked, noticing the distress on her face. Visibly upset, she responded, "I just got fired." I caught up to her and said, "I'm sorry to hear that. Can we talk? I have something that might interest you." Sasha stopped, suspicion in her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked, wary. "I want to offer you a job," I said, getting straight to the point. "Doing what?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Sales and marketing at my software company," I replied, keeping it professional. "I didn't know you owned a company. Wait, how did you know I was getting fired today?" she asked, her sharp mind catching on quickly. "I keep a close eye on my competition and didn't want to miss out on talent," I said, revealing just enough to satisfy her. "How much?" she asked, cutting to the chase. "Same salary, plus 20%? But you'll need to cover your own place. I saw your apartment listed in the company records and prefer no strings attached," I clarified. "Deal. When do I start?" She agreed without hesitation. "You're on the clock already. I'll pick you up around the corner so Jacob doesn't see. He's probably watching," I instructed, planning ahead. As I walked away, I glanced back and saw Sasha flipping off Jacob's office. I picked her up and we headed to my place. On the drive, I told her about my marriage. When I mentioned I hadn't been intimate with my wife in 2 years, Sasha asked if I was kidding. "Not since I found out she was cheating," I confessed, the weight of the situation heavy in my voice. I explained that I wouldn't be married much longer, but needed Jenny's cooperation to secure my company from Jacob. I asked Sasha to keep this information to herself. She smiled warmly, her brown eyes sparkling with understanding. When we arrived, Liz was there, and her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Who's this?" she demanded. "This is my new head of sales and marketing. She'll be working here for now. Any issues, Liz?" I introduced Sasha, making my authority clear. "No issues," Liz replied, though her tone was reluctant. Sasha seemed surprised by her new title, but I set her up at a desk next to mine. We spent the day reviewing my new software, which impressed her, especially the sales module. Over the past 2 years, I had painstakingly rewritten all of Jacob's programs using cheap labor and countless hours. My new software was faster, more compact, and far more intuitive, including features Jacob had dismissed as too expensive. I gave Sasha a few leads already using my sales software, and she quickly secured appointments for demos. Before she left, I told her I'd be having a serious conversation with Jenny in the kitchen and that I wanted her nearby. "I might need your help tonight," I hinted, the gravity of the situation clear in my tone. I left the office door open and called Jenny into the kitchen. "We need to talk," I began, bracing for the confrontation. "Jenny, I'm not going to sleep with you anymore." "But we've been getting along so well," she protested, clearly caught off guard by my abrupt declaration. "I need you and your sisters to seduce someone," I said, cutting straight to the point. Jenny's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "What? We're not some kind of call girls you can just command around," she snapped, her voice rising with indignation. "What if I offer you a clean divorce, no strings attached, and you can remarry and have the life you've always wanted?" I proposed, trying to make the offer more tempting. "You'll let me divorce you without dragging infidelity into it?" she asked, her tone shifting as she mulled it over. "Exactly," I confirmed. Jenny's defiance began to melt into a more calculating expression. "Who do you want us to seduce?" she asked, now more willing to play along. "My boss, Jacob. You and your sisters need to meet him at a hotel tonight," I directed, laying out the plan. "We can't do it tonight. How about tomorrow?" She tried to negotiate. "It has to be tonight. He just broke up with his girlfriend and he'll be looking for someone new," I insisted, leaving no room for argument. "All right, but who'll look after the kids?" she asked, ever the pragmatist. "Sasha and I will take care of them," I reassured her. Jenny hesitated, about to ask something about Sasha, but I quickly pulled out a sleek new purse from under the table. "I got you a gift," I said, steering the conversation. I pointed to the small black buttons on the purse. These are hidden cameras. Just make sure they have a clear view, I explained, my tone casual but firm. Jenny's face darkened with uncertainty. I'm not okay with being recorded, she admitted, her voice tinged with discomfort. I've got hours of footage of you with other guys, I stated bluntly. I've got a tape of you with Ron and Mark that runs over 2 hours long, plus plenty of footage of you and Cheryl in our bed. Don't tell me you're suddenly camera shy, I added, reminding her of my leverage. Jenny's face fell, her shoulders slumping. You really have videos of me with Ron, Mark, and Cheryl? Her voice was barely audible, the reality of the situation hitting her hard. Yes, and a lot more, I confirmed without hesitation. If I do this, will you delete all the recordings? She asked, a flicker of hope in her voice. Absolutely. Do this for me, and they're gone, I promised, sealing the deal. Jenny forced a reluctant smile, accepting the situation. Fine, let's get it over with, she agreed, her voice steadying as she resigned herself to the plan. Jenny called her sisters, Liz and Emily, and laid out the plan. Within 20 minutes, they arrived with their kids, dressed in outfits more revealing than I'd ever seen them wear. I didn't even know Jenny had anything so suggestive, but with the offer of free babysitting, a luxury hotel suite, and a new target, they were more than eager to comply. Once we were alone on the porch, I showed the sisters a picture of Jacob and said, "Your job is to wear him out." Their eager smiles told me they were more than ready. After they left, Sasha and I settled the kids in front of the TV and went to the office to monitor the situation. I began explaining more of the plan to Sasha, but she cut me off. I don't need the details. From what I know, Jacob's getting exactly what he deserves. The sisters arrived at the lounge before Jacob, and I told Jenny to leave her purse on the table so I could monitor everything. Jacob eventually showed up, but not alone. He was with Nancy, one of the secretaries from work. Sasha cursed under her breath when she saw Nancy. "That woman doesn't waste any time, does she?" she muttered, snapping a photo of them at the bar and sending it to Nancy's boyfriend, Glenn, with a quick call to stir the pot. Within minutes, Nancy was crying and storming out, leaving Jacob looking bewildered. Jenny seized the moment, calling out, "Forget her, Jacob! Come over here!" He quickly joined the sisters at their table. Before long, they were heading to the hotel suite. Inside, the sisters wasted no time undressing, with Jacob quickly following suit. What unfolded next was a chaotic scene. After about 25 minutes, I realized things were getting heated. I glanced over at Sasha, who seemed equally affected. I apologized and offered to turn it off, but Sasha suddenly got up and left the room. I thought I might have crossed a line, but she returned quickly, locking the door behind her. "The kids are asleep. I need you now," she said, her eyes intense. After 2 years without sex, I wasn't about to say no. We hooked up, and afterward resumed watching the footage. "They might actually kill him," I joked. "Not a bad way to go, though," Sasha smirked. "Jacob's usually one and done. I saw Jenny give him 2 Viagra. Think he actually took both?" "Looks like he did," I replied, watching the screen. Later, Sasha and I slipped into the guest room, showered together, and spent the night there. I wanted to make the most of our time. We set an alarm to wake up early to avoid any awkward morning encounters with the kids. The next morning, I fast-forwarded through the video. The sisters had kept Jacob busy for over 3 hours, treating him like a human sex toy, and judging by his grin, he didn't mind at all. Sasha was ready to leave, but I convinced her to stay a bit longer. She even made breakfast for the kids, who were clearly impressed. Sasha left around 9 to change clothes. Jenny and her sisters returned around 11, looking exhausted but pleased with themselves, while Jacob looked thoroughly spent. I gave Jenny more instructions and had her call Jacob to arrange a repeat performance. He agreed, but insisted on only taking 1 Viagra this time. They started drinking in the suite before Jacob arrived. When he knocked, Jenny handed him 2 Viagra, but he only took 1. Shortly after, Ron and Mark showed up, greeted Jacob, and joined in. I stopped watching at that point, preferring to wait until Sasha returned. She had meetings that morning, so I planned to watch the footage with her later. With the sisters still at the hotel and the kids at school, I skimmed through the tape. It felt like I was watching a cheap European B-movie from the 70s, but I got what I needed. I rented an apartment downtown, right across from Jacob's office, and paid a maid to keep it clean and stocked with food and water. I orchestrated a daily rendezvous between Jenny and her sisters with Jacob after work. Anytime Jacob tried to duck out for a day of rest, I gave the sisters detailed instructions on where to accidentally run into him, ensuring he couldn't slip away. To keep Liz and Emily on board, I promised them 10% of Jenny's projected $220,000 monthly allowance once she was divorced and had secured the baby. Jenny, knowing her sisters would leech off her regardless, agreed, realizing that without their help, the divorce might not happen. Eventually, I compiled a highlight reel of Jacob's misadventures and sent it to his wife, meticulously blacking out everyone's faces except his. Initially, I feared the plan might backfire. After all, Jacob's wife was not only beautiful but also the daughter of a notorious local mob boss. When Jacob returned home, his wife greeted him with icy silence. She dragged him to their bedroom, stripped him naked, and bound him to the bed. She played the video on their massive TV while Jacob whimpered for forgiveness. Without uttering a word, she produced a large paddle and began striking him mercilessly. Finally, she spoke, her voice like ice. "I'm divorcing you. Resist, and I'll release these videos to everyone in your life." Jacob, shaking with fear, nodded in compliance. She continued, "I'm leaving for a week on a yacht with my lover. By the time I get back, I expect the locks to be changed and for you to be out of this house. You'll leave with nothing but the clothes on your back and your car. If you ever return, there will be dire consequences." As she exited the room, Jacob screamed through his gag, but she coldly replied, "Don't worry, I've arranged for a couple of men to escort you out. Enjoy the rest of your life." The next morning, two imposing men in suits untied Jacob. When he attempted to head toward the bathroom, they brandished firearms, forcing him to dress quickly and leave the house. They watched him until he drove away, ensuring he didn't linger. Jacob's wife wasted no time filing for divorce that same day. Though devastated, Jacob was too engrossed with the sisters to dwell on his situation. He began staying at the apartment I had set up, making it easier for the sisters to keep tabs on him. When they saw the bruises on his backside, they burst into laughter, with Liz even playfully spanking him until he cried. With his accounts frozen by his wife, Jacob soon found himself struggling to pay his employees. Losing 25% of his business to a new competitor only added to his woes. I discreetly contacted 3 key employees at Jacob's company, hinting at potential payroll issues and offering them positions at my growing firm. They didn't jump at the offer immediately, but I left the door open. A few days later, when Jacob attempted to access his garage and found it locked, I sent him a text. "I told you, only your clothes and car." Convinced his wife was behind the leaked video, Jacob was blindsided when footage of him with Ron and Mark began circulating within the industry, thanks to an anonymous tip to a gossip-prone competitor. Within a week, the 3 key employees I had contacted returned my call, eager to accept my offer. With Jacob's reputation in tatters, his company teetering on the edge of collapse, and his divorce looming, I managed to capture 90% of his clients in just 60 days. His company officially shut down 2 days after his divorce was finalized. Once my business was thriving, I filed for an uncontested divorce and paid extra to expedite the process. I handed Jenny the house, though she didn't realize I had taken out a second mortgage to fund my startup. I also gave her half of our $88,000 joint account, her car, and nothing else. When she demanded half of my company, I bluntly told her it wasn't worth anything on paper yet and threatened to change the grounds for divorce to infidelity. She quickly signed the papers, convinced that her $220,000 a month was within reach. We finalized our divorce 60 days later. The day after, Jenny hastily married the mechanic, likely expecting a life of luxury. She spent $8,000 on the wedding, plus the $20,000 her parents gave her. Shortly afterward, she was pregnant, and rumors circulated that they had been physically involved even during the ceremony. 3 months later, Jenny and her mother visited the trust fund lawyers, fully expecting the $20,000 monthly payments to start rolling in. Instead, they were shocked to learn that the trust had already been awarded to another candidate. The situation escalated so quickly that the lawyers had to call the police as Jenny and her mother caused significant damage to the office in their rage. The audio recording of the incident was both alarming and, in a way, amusing. A few weeks later, Jenny showed up at my house in a short red dress, wearing nothing underneath, in a desperate attempt to renegotiate the divorce settlement. She lifted her dress, asking if I missed her, and suggested we get back together. I snapped a photo and coolly asked if her new husband would appreciate receiving it. Then, without a word, I slammed the door in her face. She pounded on the door, screaming and crying, begging me not to send the photo. I told her I wouldn't, on the condition that she never showed her face at my home again. Her parting words were pitiful. "I'm sorry I ruined our marriage. I wish you had been enough for me." It was clear she was lost in a delusion. Eventually, I let go of my obsession with surveillance, destroying all the recordings I had amassed. Jacob vanished after his company's collapse, with his last known whereabouts being San Francisco's Castro district. His ex-wife remarried a much younger CEO and went on to have 3 children with him. My own kids eventually graduated high school but drifted into dead-end jobs. When they asked me for work, I told them to get in touch if they ever decided to pursue a career in programming. Ron and Mark, leveraging the notoriety from their infamous video, pivoted to a different kind of stardom, eventually aligning with a successful business owner who was looking to retire. Liz ended up in a better place. She and Cheryl, who had divorced her own husband, got married and seemed genuinely happy together. Jenny's parents lost their last property and eventually went their separate ways in a bitter divorce. Jenny herself stayed married to the mechanic for about a year before losing her house and being abandoned. She now works as a waitress, lives in a rundown trailer, and raises the mechanic's child alone. As for those who had affairs with my wife and others, I didn't let them off easily. After Jenny lost the trust fund money, I sent all the incriminating videos and voice recordings to their spouses and families, using Jenny's own email account to ensure maximum impact. I sent out over 300 emails and made sure to clone Jenny's phone, ensuring every message reached its intended target. Jenny quickly fired back with an angry text, accusing me of betraying my promise to delete the recordings. I responded with a simple message: "Thanks for teaching me that honesty was unnecessary in our marriage. It made getting what I wanted much easier." She never replied after that. As I dug deeper into the mess, I uncovered 13 divorce cases linked to Jenny, Liz, Emily, and their mechanic lover. The mechanic, notorious for his so-called big tool, was directly responsible for 8 divorces. He had a habit of seducing other men's wives and then sending them demeaning messages about their husbands. Liz mostly fooled around with single women, so she didn't directly cause any divorces. Emily, however, was responsible for 10. In none of these cases did the couples reconcile. The wives couldn't find respect for their husbands after the dust settled. My mother-in-law had a hand in 1 divorce, and Jenny was directly tied to 13, though 2 couples managed to reconcile. But these numbers only scratched the surface. Some of the men involved pointed fingers at other women, which led to even more divorces and a few arrests when things got heated. Thankfully, no one lost their life, but there were plenty of serious consequences. The mechanic who earned the nickname Lefty after a particularly messy incident with Liz and Cheryl ended up with a permanently crooked tool, bent 90 degrees to the left. He tried to press charges, but the nature of his injury made it a tough sell. The detectives handling the case struggled to keep their composure as he explained what happened. As for Lefty's ex-wife, I met with her to apologize for the blame she took during the sisters' divorces. She took it in stride, even joking about the time she broke my mother-in-law's nose, calling it the highlight of her year. Curious about her dating life, I introduced her to my recently divorced neighbor, a tall, rugged guy who used to play rugby. They hit it off instantly, and after a barbecue at my place, she and her kids stayed over at his house and never left. 6 months later, they got married with Sasha, who was 7 months pregnant, standing as a bridesmaid. As for me, my business is booming. Before stepping back, Sasha locked in 3 major clients that secured the company's future. We married quickly. I couldn't help myself. She keeps getting pregnant. Now we're expecting our 4th child. We moved closer to my parents, settling in a beachfront property where it's warm almost year-round. Our home is cozy, but we spend most of our time on the large deck with our 3 enormous dogs. I've even trained the dogs to growl and bark at a picture of Jenny, just in case she ever shows up asking for money. Unfortunately, one of the vet assistants in town looks a bit like Jenny, so she has to stay out of sight when the dogs are around. Before our wedding, I laid out everything about my surveillance hobby to Sasha. She took it as a cautionary tale but laughed it off, saying she had nothing to worry about, a perfect response. And yes, as you probably guessed, I was the one in charge of the trust set up in Jenny's uncle's name. I shut it down, reclaimed the money, and started fresh.